The English word underrated is defined as something that is not valued or rated highly enough. In music, it practically means an artist who doesn't achieve the success they deserve. As you can understand, with the exception of certain bands that reach the pinnacle of fame, Metallica, Iron Maiden, etc., everyone else can be included in this category. It's clearly a matter of personal preference. The choice I made here is a mix of the prevailing opinion among public and critics, as well as my personal opinion, at least regarding why I chose a particular band and not another. Generally speaking, I believe that some of the big favorites in this category were chosen. I don't think there are any particular surprises. I would definitely like your suggestions in the comments for a possible second part, which will obviously depend on how this video does. Finally, I'd like to say that in the last part of each section, I also attempt an assessment of why each artist didn't achieve the success they deserved. There, obviously, these assessments are purely personal. For those who haven't heard the bands I chose, I have created a Spotify playlist with 10 songs for each of the 10 bands. The link is always in the description. They started in 1983 in Zurich, Switzerland, using various lineups, but they reached their classic form in 1985, when former Celtic Frost roadies, bassist Ron Broder, and guitarist Tommy Vetterli joined the band to support drummer Marky Edelman. Since they couldn't find a singer, Tom G. Warrior, leader of Celtic Frost, did the vocals on their 1986 demo, Death Cult. It was finally decided that bassist Broder would take over vocal duties permanently. The first part of their career produced 6 albums: R.I.P. 1987, Punishment for Decadence 1988, No More Color 1989, Mental Vortex 1991, Grin 1993, and Coroner 1995. Excluding the rather typical thrash with neoclassical metal elements of the first one, all the others showed an increasingly technical approach, resulting in the band being considered, along with Watchtower and another band I'll mention in this video, as one of the founders of technical thrash metal and, why not, of progressive metal. The big change happened in No More Color, where they added both the use of chromatic scales and changes in musical meter to their very recognizable style. In The Amazing Grin, they also added elements of groove and industrial metal. Their eponymous release of 1995 was a collection with enough new music, 8 songs and 1 cover, that it could be considered almost equivalent to a new album. These songs reveal an even more experimental, almost avant-garde mood. There will be no continuation, as the new reality in metal will lead to the band's dissolution in 1996, with Vetterli even finding a temporary home with Creator. The band will reunite in 2010, initially only for concerts. Edelman will leave in 2014 as he didn't want to write new music with them, and will be replaced by Diego Rapacietti. Rumors about a new album started circulating as early as 2021, while the band began playing new songs at concerts in 2022. Finally, Coroner's 7th album was released in 2025 under the title Dissonance Theory. It's an excellent example of authentic tech thrash, with the Swiss band teaching the youngsters how the style is played. Despite the fact that all the band's albums were critically acclaimed and that their tours reached every part of the globe, they practically never achieved the commercial success I believe they deserved. For example, they never reached the level of the Teutonic Big Three, Creator, Sodom, Destruction, or their compatriots Celtic Frost. Honestly, I've never understood why. It could be Broder's somewhat unique vocals, or perhaps the audience wasn't ready for such a technical and cerebral sound, I don't know. Anyway, it's positive that after all these years, they seem to be getting some of the recognition they definitely deserve. They started in 1979 in Springfield, Missouri. After many adventures and false starts, the classic and unchanged to this day lineup of Doug Pinnick, bass, lead vocals, Jerry Gaskell, drums, backing vocals, and Ty Tabor, guitar backing vocals, ended up in Houston, Texas, where they recorded their debut album, Out of the Silent Planet, for Megaforce Records in 1988. This will be followed by what many consider their magnum opus, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska in 1989 and Faith, Hope, Love in 1990. Although they didn't achieve the success of other hard rock artists of the time, the last of their three albums entered the Billboard Top 100, which led them to sign with Atlantic Records. One reason for this is likely that many alternative heavy artists publicly praised them. Pearl Jam's Jeff Ament stated that they discovered grunge, although their sound had nothing to do with the idiom. So Atlantic saw an opportunity to acquire another artist who would satisfy the trends of the time. The thing is, although their first album released there, the self-titled 1992 record, didn't do so well commercially, their second, Dogman of 1994, was a success, but not as big as Atlantic had hoped. So they left the company after Ear Candy in 1996. They continued to release albums steadily until 2008. And in 2023, they released what might be, or might not be, their last album, Three Sides of One. It's a band that is a paradox in itself. From their first album, they consistently had the absolute support of the press and critics, while many musicians over the years have spoken very positively about them. In fact, they have gone down in history as a musician's band. Also, their music was definitely not difficult or incomprehensible. They combined hard rock and proto-heavy metal with elements of soul and funk, Beatles-style harmonies, blues, or even gospel. Their songs were particularly catchy and could have easily become radio hits. And yet, they never had great commercial success. I believe that, at first, they were too heavy for the glam metal audience and quite lightweight for a thrash audience. When grunge came along, things didn't change much. They weren't really grunge anyway, no matter what Jeff Ament says. Their biggest opportunity came when they made their sound more grungy in 1994, which gave them some success, but not to the level they needed or deserved. I also believe that being labeled a Christian band, due to the lyrics in their first four albums, did them more bad than good. They will later clearly distance themselves from that label, but it was too late. One of the most versatile and workaholic bands you can imagine. From 1987 to the present, they have released 28 albums and 20 EPs. It's the third consecutive three-member band, although things aren't so simple here, since they had two drummers from 2006 to 2015, and from 2023 to this day. They've also recorded an album with two bassists. Guitarist and singer Buzz Osborne is present on all 28 albums, and drummer Dale Crover is on 27 out of the 28. The band has had various bassists over the years, including Matt Lukin, who later founded Mudhoney, Lori Black, daughter of Shirley Temple, Jeff Pincus of the Butthole Surfers, and Trevor Dunn of Mr. Bungle. Last in line since 2015 is Stephen Shane McDonald. They have also released 7 collaborative albums, including one with ambient artist Lustmord and one with Napalm Death. They played a huge role in the early days of the Seattle scene, both through their musical influence, as they are considered among the fathers of grunge, and through their friendship with Nirvana. Osborne, for example, was the one who introduced Dave Grohl to the rest of the band. Besides grunge, they are considered a key influence on sludge metal, stoner metal, doom metal, and even noise rock. They have toured the world many times and are friends with many commercially successful musicians. And yet, none of their albums has entered the official album charts of any country. The closest they came to major success was when, through their friendship with Nirvana, they signed with Atlantic and made the album Houdini, which entered the Billboard Heatseekers chart, reaching number 29. However, their next album, Stoner Witch, was a rather experimental work with elements of stoner and noise rock, which naturally didn't do anything commercially, and their Atlantic years ended in 1996. Since 2002, They have found a permanent home with Mike Patton's label, Ipecac Recordings, and I don't think they are particularly bothered by the fact that they never achieved commercial success. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have it or that they didn't deserve it. I believe that their musical versatility and the fact that they always did whatever they wanted were among the elements that prevented them from gaining something more than a fanatical, dedicated core of followers. Also, within this philosophy of do what you want was the inseparable relationship they had with traditional metal. They were big fans of Black Sabbath, Venom, and Judas Priest. They never hid this love of theirs, which, although just one of the many dimensions of their music, was probably not always easily accepted in the alternative circles they moved in. They were founded in San Francisco in 1980, but by 1981, they had moved to Aberdeen, Washington, and are therefore considered part of the Seattle metal scene. By 1984, their classic lineup had been finalized, consisting of David Wayne, vocals, Craig Wells, lead guitar, Kurt Vanderhoof, rhythm guitar, Duke Erickson, bass, and Kirk Arrington, drums. With this lineup, they will release their first two classic albums, their self-titled debut in 1984 and The Dark in 1986, which attained significant commercial success, reaching number 92 on the Billboard charts. During the album tours, they played with bands like Testament, Overkill, King Diamond, and Celtic Frost, as well as all the members of the thrash Big Four. But immediately after came the successive shocks. Initially, the guitarist and mastermind of the band, Kurt Vanderhoof, withdrew from active participation in the group and simply continued to help them with compositions, while, in 1988, David Wayne also left. They were replaced by Metallica roadie John Marshall and Mike Howe, respectively. With this lineup, they will release 3 more albums, Blessing in Disguise in 1989, which would do even better than The Dark, The Human Factor in 1991, which introduced a new image and a more modern sound, and was considered their big opportunity to become truly huge. Unfortunately, however, it won't even make it into the top 200 albums in their home country, and the opportunity will pass them by. And 1993's Hanging in the Balance, which wouldn't do any better, leading to the band's breakup in 1996. They would return relatively soon in 1998, with Vanderhoof fully active this time. There will be more periods of breakups and reunions, while the band has remained constantly active from 2012 until today. During all these years, the lineup changed more times than Megadeth's, with Vanderhoof being the only constant member throughout. Sadly, they also had to deal with 2 tragedies, the deaths of their 2 singers, Wayne in 2005 and Howe in 2021, while Arrington also passed away in 2023, although he had been out of the band for many years. During these periods, 8 more albums were released, with the last one coming out in 2023. Their latest lineup, which was finalized in 2025, includes 2 very strong names of the scene: drummer Ken Mary, formerly of Alice Cooper, Chastain, House of Lords, Fifth Angel, and, most importantly, the eternal Megadeth bassist Dave Ellefson, another band for whom things went completely crazy. Their music was excellent, the reviews were very good, they were on the best tours. Back in 86 to 87, they were definitely one of the biggest names in the wider thrash scene, and they were also good friends with Metallica. And yet, they never managed to become very, very big. When it was their turn with The Human Factor, some compatriots from Seattle beat them to it. Beyond that, of course, I believe 2 factors played a role in them never being recognized as much as they deserved, and as much as they should have been. Firstly, the lineup changes in 1988, and secondly, the fact that the genre they played was always between thrash and US power metal, without going to the full aggression of the former or embracing the melody of the latter. In an era when categorization was vital for rock artists, the fact that they weren't clearly something condemned them to never be recognized as they deserved. The band was formed in 1992 and rose from the ashes of Sanctuary, initially including singer Warrell Dane and bassist Jim Shepard, who were soon joined by guitarist Jeff Loomis, all former members of the Seattle band. A permanent drummer will be found in 1995, and it will be Van Williams. This lineup would remain the band's core until 2011, with the sporadic addition of a second guitarist for certain albums and tours. The band released a total of 7 albums from 1995 to 2010, and a year later, they went inactive without officially disbanding, as Loomis and Williams had left, and Sanctuary, without Loomis, had reunited. The band's future became particularly uncertain with the death of Warrell Dane in 2017, although in 2024, Loomis reunited the band with Williams. Shepard is considered to have retired from music. So far, no other members have been announced. The band remained far from any significant success in their homeland throughout their entire career. Their most successful album there was 2000's Dead Heart in a Dead World, which has sold around 30,000 copies, while the only one to enter the top 200 of the Billboard chart is their latest to date, The Obsidian Conspiracy, number 132. Essentially, they built their career around the success they had in Europe, particularly in Germany, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, while always being beloved by the Greek audience. Also throughout their career, they were plagued by bad luck, with various health problems constantly arising, culminating in Dane's infection and his inability to sing on the night they were supposed to film the DVD, The Year of the Voyager, in Germany in 2006. It would eventually be filmed a month later. It's one of those cases where I really can't understand why commercial success was so far out of reach for this band. The music they played was an excellent and extremely rich version of progressive metal, within which you could find thrash metal, power metal, classic heavy metal, and even a bit of groove metal. Their albums were all very interesting from beginning to end. The songs they wrote were all exceptionally well-crafted, catchy. They had ballads, musical variety, technical playing, imagination, and progressiveness. They participated in many tours around the world with various big names of the era, ranging from Opeth to Shadows Fall. Honestly, it seems like there was only room for one incredibly successful progressive metal band in their homeland, and all the others had to settle for Europe.
Like a firestorm that burns the ground, you're standing on with feet to fire.
They were formed as Avenger in Herne, West Germany in 1984. Under this name, they released an album and an EP before changing it to Rage in 1986. Under the new name, Reign of Fear and Execution Guaranteed, were released in 1986 and 1987, respectively, playing something close to powerish speed metal, which placed them among the big four of proto-power metal, along with Helloween, Running Wild, and Gravedigger. They started as 4, but also became a power trio. In 1988, they would build their first classic lineup with P.V. Wagner, leader and the band's only constant member throughout their career, bass, vocals, Manny Schmidt, guitar, and Chris Efthymiadis, drums. With this lineup, they would change their sound to pure power metal, with some particularly melodic moments, and gradually some progressive elements, releasing 5 albums and an EP by 1993. Their second classic lineup, consisting of Wagner, guitarist Victor Smolsky, and drummer Mike Tirana, will cover the period from 1999 to 2006, producing 4 albums and 2 live recordings. In the years between the 2 periods, some very interesting albums will be released, 2 of which feature the first complete participation of a classical orchestra on an album of original music by a heavy metal artist. From 2007 until today, they have consistently changed members and released very good albums, remaining true to heavy/power metal with occasional elements of the progressive, symphonic, or even thrash subgenres. They are the only heavy metal band I can remember having such a large number of albums, 27, none of which have scored below 3 out of 5 on Rate Your Music. I think it must be the least known band out of the 10 I'm going to present in this video. They might have been in the proto-power/speed metal Big Four, but they never came close to the regular power metal Big Four. They had some success, mainly in their homeland and the rest of Central Europe, as well as in Japan, but nothing more. They remain relatively unknown, even among power metal fans. If I had to guess why this happened, it might be due to the very strong German accent in Peavy's voice, especially in the very melodic songs, or even the fact that they lacked a gimmick that could make them stand out. Halloween had the Pumpkins, Running Wild had the Pirates, Blind Guardian had Tolkien. Musically, they are truly excellent, especially during the period 1988 to 1993, and I would encourage you to check them out even now, more than 40 years after they started.
Another sleepless night, concrete paradise, sirens.
The band was formed in 1979 by the Oliva brothers, John on vocals and Chris on guitar, under the name Avatar. By January 1983, they had already changed their name when they entered the then relatively unknown Morrisound Studios in Tampa, Florida. And within a day and a half, recorded material for an album, Sirens, April 1983, and an EP, The Dungeons Are Calling, March 1984. In 1985, they will release their second album, Power of the Night. Until then, their music was firmly placed in the US power metal category. In 1986, they would make a rather clumsy and unsuccessful attempt at something more user-friendly and light with the album Fight for the Rock. That same year, they would finalize their classic lineup with the addition of bassist Johnny Lee Middleton, who would join drummer Steve Doc Wakeholds. The failure of their latest album will bring them one step away from disbanding, from which they will be saved by producer/manager Paul O'Neill. He will boost their morale, and with his help, they will release the amazing Hall of the Mountain King in 1987 and the unique Gutter Ballet in 1989. The first is one of the cornerstones of American power metal, while the second combines that sound with elements from Broadway musicals and rock opera, something no metal band of the time had ever attempted before. In 1991, its successor, a concept album titled Streets, will be released. Initially, the reception was rather cold, with the album being considered a cheap copy of Gutter Ballet, while the changes in the music scene will commercially condemn it. The status of the record has changed over the years, but these difficulties, along with various other problems, would lead to John Oliva's departure and the hiring of Zach Stevens, with whom the band would release the excellent Edge of Thorns in 1993. Unfortunately, that's when tragedy struck with the death of guitarist Chris Oliva in a car accident. John will return to the band, not on vocals, but only on keyboards, and the band will continue until 2001, with many lineup changes and 4 albums of new music, 2 of which will be concept albums. During this period, they will get quite close to the progressive metal scene. They will definitively disband in 2002, return for some concerts in 2014 to 15, and as a regular band in 2023, while in 2025, they will do a tour of festivals around the world. They have their final album ready, expected to be released in 2026. The fact that this band never became a million seller is inexplicable. When Gutter Ballet came out, it was their big moment, but they missed the opportunity to capitalize on it. A song like When the Crowds Are Gone should have swept the charts worldwide. Perhaps they never became that big, because the style of rock opera meets musical metal they played didn't quite fit the musical trends of the time. That's the only thing I can think of. Of course, after Chris Oliva's death, any momentum they might have had was completely lost. Over the years after their breakup, they became legends in various countries around the world, such as Germany, Brazil, Chile, or my country. So their return to concerts in 2025 was simply triumphant. For them, of course, there's also the irony of seeing a band that plays Christmas songs, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which came from their own ranks and uses the same musicians, achieved the success they should have had, selling millions of copies. I owe them this because of the mistake I made in the video about glam metal, where I presented them as New Yorkers. Now, of course, you'll tell me, how do you call a band that has sold 14 million copies in America underrated? As I said in the introduction, everything is relative. There are those who say that for the time they came out and the talent they had, 14 million is too little. They started in 1981 in Sacramento, California, as City Kid. They released their first album in 1986, titled Mechanical Resonance. Their hard rock style, as well as their tours with names like David Lee Roth, Def Leppard, and Poison, led them to be categorized as glam metal, something they hated at the time. 3 more albums followed: The Great Radio Controversy, 1989, Psychotic Supper, 1991, and Bust a Nut, 1993. They will all certify at least gold in their homeland. They might have been different from the rest of the glam metal scene, but the truth is that their 2 biggest hits of their career were a ballad, Love Song from the Great Radio Controversy, and an acoustic track, their cover of Signs from the 1990 acoustic EP 5-man acoustical jam. And of course, like the other glam metal bands, they wouldn't be able to adapt to the 90s and would break up in 1996. They will return in 2000 with 4 out of the 5 original members. Only guitarist Tommy Skiok was missing. Their journey from there onward is a model of consistency and seriousness, which demonstrates their level as a band. 5 more albums of original music will be released, as well as 2 cover albums. In the final years of the previous decade, they developed a collaborative relationship with Phil Collen of Def Leppard, who produced their latest album, Shock, 2019. Many people have said over the years that they should have been much bigger than they were. Judging purely by their musical output, that's true. Their album Psychotic Supper, for example, showcased an extremely eclectic style that incorporated elements of heavy metal, blues, folk, and psychedelia in a way that no one else was doing at the time. However, back then, other factors also played a role in whether someone sold millions of records and became famous in rock music. I'll put it simply: Tesla was only interested in playing music, not causing trouble and making headlines in the magazines of the time. And I'll illustrate with an example because I once heard someone wondering why Appetite for Destruction sold so well, and Mechanical Resonance didn't. But Guns N' Roses were 5 incredibly unique individuals, like a team of alien superhero thugs that immediately made an impression on everyone. Tesla were good guys who played good music, but which of the members did you even know the name of, besides the singer Jeff Keith? Guitarist Rick Wartell formed Trouble in 1978 in Chicago during his school years. He soon found second guitarist Bruce Franklin and singer Eric Wagner, who would accompany him throughout the period of the original lineup of the band for the next 16 years. Drawing inspiration from Black Sabbath, the band used dark, down-tuned guitars, creating a classic doom metal sound, a style that was still in its very early days. Of course, at the beginning of their career, they became known more for their Christian lyrics, which were often openly inspired by the Bible, than their music. This led their label, Metal Blade, to promote them as a white metal band, in contrast to satanic black metal groups. It's not clear whether this did them any good or not, but it certainly helped get their name out there. Their first 3 albums, Psalm 9, 1984, The Skull, 1985, and Run to the Light, 1987, are excellent examples of pure, unadulterated doom metal, and are practically the archetype of the style that was later called traditional doom metal. A 3-year hiatus followed before the band signed with Rick Rubin's Def American Records. The notorious producer wanted to do for the Chicago band what he did for Danzig and the Cult, to cut away all the fat from their sound, to strip it down, to make it drier and more accessible to a wider audience. With him, the band recorded two albums, the self-titled in 1990 and Manic Frustration in 1992, on both of which they play a more old-school rock sound, where there is also room for influences like the Beatles and psychedelia, especially on Manic Frustration. Of course, they didn't abandon the heavy and doomy core of their sound. It remains purely trouble. Throughout that period, they went on many successful tours of the time. But despite this, unlike other heavy rock bands Rubin worked with, major success never came. So their adventure with Deaf American will end soon. The band then released Plastic Green Head on Music for Nations in 1995, maintaining the sound of the Rubin era. They later disbanded, reunited, released an album in 2008 and another in 2013. I think both parts of their career deserved better luck. In their pure doom metal era, the fact that they were labeled white metal probably did them more harm than good, given the state of rock music at that time. Their psychedelic era produced three excellent albums that were unfortunately 20 years ahead of their time. And that's not a figure of speech, since the proto-metal heavy psych style, which gave rise to many new big names in the late 2000s and early 2010s, was actually started by them in 1990. Their entire journey points to an excellent band that, unlike others I've mentioned in my videos, were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and in fact, twice. The Franco-Canadians were formed in Jonquière, Quebec, in 1982. The strange nicknames they used immediately caught the attention: Piggy, Denis Damour, guitar; Blackie, Jean-Yves Thériault, bass; Snake, Denis Bélanger, vocals; and Away, Michel Langevin, drums. Their first 5 albums showed a sound in constant turmoil and evolution. They started with noisy speed metal with elements of thrash, War and Pain, Roar. Transitioned into technical thrash with elements of psychedelia, hardcore punk, and dissonance, Killing Technology, Dimension, Hatros. And finally arrived at the progressive metal masterpiece, Nothing Face, in 1989. In their next 2 albums, Angel Rat, 1991, and The Outer Limits, 1993, they might have had their only chance to approach the mainstream with a somewhat simpler sound, although still very progressive in the way, for example, Pink Floyd are progressive. In the end, nothing will happen, and as a result, both Blackie and Snake will leave. They will survive the 90s with the somewhat strange Negatron and Phobos, while they seem to regain their momentum with the excellent self-titled album of 2003, where Snake returned and none other than Jason Newsted, freshly departed from Metallica, played bass. Unfortunately, this momentum will be cut short with the death of Piggy in 2005. Still, the band will find the courage to continue and release a series of excellent examples of their always unique sound, with 5 albums from 2006 to 2022 and a collection of re-recorded songs in 2023. Just think about how beloved they are by some musicians. The very well-known indie rock artist Ryan Adams released the album Orion in 2010, which was a kind of tribute to their Angel Rat/Outer Limits era. They are always referred to as the archetype of the underrated band in the metal scene. The series of albums released from 1984 to 1993 was so unique and original in every way. From the music they contained, the lyrics, the album covers, everything. Within these albums, they dared to do things that no one else was doing at the time and refused to be stuck in a fixed style. Their influence is enormous. Listen to Mastodon's albums from the mid-2000s, for example. And many artists have expressed admiration for them numerous times. Yet they remained forever distant from a mainstream audience. However, things are probably easier to explain here than for some of the other bands in this video. Being a pioneer and trying new things always comes at a price. When they became simpler and more alternative, they were already labeled as a metal band, and thus couldn't attract the interest of the grunge audience. And so, they remained forever in the shadows and on the fringes of the underground.